Hi, this is Dr. Riley. Um, Today, I want to talk to you about two of the COVID-19 vaccines. These are the mRNA vaccines. Lately, as the vaccines have become more available, I've had a few patients ask me about the vaccines to see if they are safe. And I do feel bad for the patients because I feel like this is how you are at home, right? That there's just like too much information, too many sources of information. What exactly is kind of going on? It's hard to really know exactly. And I know that especially in social media, sometimes people will give you information that's not entirely so correct, right? So today, I just want to talk a little bit about the vaccine so that way you could see how doctors think of these kinds of things, right? So the first thing is let's just go over the anatomy, right? This is our enemy, the coronavirus, and you could see that it's usually, I think everyone's familiar with the shape by now, that it has these little spike proteins on the outside, and there's a lot of little proteins that are involved in making it up, and inside it has something called RNA. The RNA is kind of like the DNA of the virus. So this is what it uses to to replicate itself, right, or to make more copies of itself. So this is what happens when it tries to infect us. It actually these virus particles are floating around. They encounter something called the ACE2 receptor. The spike protein unfortunately fits very nicely into this ACE2 receptor. And what it does is it binds to this. And unfortunately, also, our body expresses different enzymes. And what they do is they start to break down the spike protein. They cause the release of different kinds of proteins. And these proteins allow the virus to kind of fuse with the cell and to kind of open up and to push its contents inside. And then once it's inside of us, that's when it does its stuff, right? It actually, this mRNA, which we use mRNA too, it actually goes inside the cell. It actually hijacks some of the machinery of the cell, and it tricks us into making more copies of itself. It makes the more copies of the mRNA, it makes more copies of the proteins, and then once it has enough copies and it's fairly used up the cell, it actually then again fuses with the cell membrane, and boom, it kind of extrudes itself out into our bodies, and it tries to infect more cells. Now, it is a thing that even before the coronavirus came along, doctors thought about this kind of process, and they had this idea that if if you could take the RNA, but not all of it, maybe just a small part of it, and you could actually inject it into the cell. So that way you could tell someone's body to produce just the protein that seems to be the most problematic, like the spike protein, which seems to start the whole process. Then what would happen is our body would then produce antibodies, and then these antibodies would see the coronavirus or whatever kind of virus is floating around, attack it, and then get rid of it. That would be great. That would be like having a shield against the coronavirus. So that's what they did when this started to happen. That was the problem. We needed to develop a vaccine, and we needed to develop it fast. And this process is something that people can develop fairly fast. And they were able to sequence the DNA or the RNA of the coronavirus, isolate the part that produces the spike protein, and then they were able to do studies where they injected into cell. They were able to see that the cell then was able to produce this spike protein, and then your body produced antibodies. And so this is how they do it, right? They have this mRNA. They hide it inside this little circle here. This is actually what they call a lipid bilayer. It's a nanoparticle. It's very, meaning just super small, and it kind of holds inside of it mRNA. Then what they'll do is they'll put it inside of us. This little particle encounters a cell. It actually fuses with it. It doesn't need anything. Doesn't need an ACE2 receptor. It'll just kind of like fuse with the other cell and become one with it. It's almost like a soap bubble when two soap bubbles come and then all of a sudden they kind of pop and they become one big soap bubble. So then what happens is then this opens, the mRNA it goes into the cytoplasm, and then it does the same thing that your body recognizes mRNA, and it's like, oh, there's mRNA, let's make some protein. So then it makes the spike protein inside our body. The spike protein finds its way to the outside, and then our body recognizes it as foreign, produces antibodies, and then once we have antibodies, then we're golden, right? We should be having immunity, right? So that's what they're doing, right? They take a little snip of this mRNA. They're able to make multiple copies of just that one little bit. They actually inject it into a cell. So this is my cartoon of a cell, and it just goes into this part, and it hijacks all the machinery of the cell to make more of the proteins. But it only does a certain amount just as long as the mRNA lives, which mRNAs don't survive very well. This is part of the problem with these vaccines. Like, probably you've heard on the news how some of these vaccines, they have to be kept like super cold, colder than it is like at the North Pole, because it is the thing that they'll break down very quickly if they're not. And then I just wanted to show you this picture too, because this is also another question people have, is they're like, well, I don't know if I like this, Dr. Riley. I don't want to be like genetically manipulated. And see, this is how it works. It goes actually into the cytoplasm, but it never goes in the nucleus, which, if you remember from biology, the nucleus is where we keep all our genetic information. So it actually never really even goes in there. It actually just stays on the outside. And it, again, like, hijacks all the machinery of the cell just to make this extra protein. So there is no way that it's actually going to actually change us. We're doing the same process like viruses do, right? And our body knows how to get rid of these kinds of things. So the real question is, it's safe, right? What do experts say? So yeah, experts say that the vaccines are safe, right? So here we have a picture of Dr. Fauci. He just got his vaccine. He's a happy man. I can almost tell he's smiling under this mask, right? He looks happy. So, then I have also had it like, well, what about the preservatives, right? There are definitely some people who, I don't know, they have a lot of ideas about vaccines, and so luckily these vaccines, they don't have preservatives, right? So, all you have to do is go into Google and you'll be able to see this for yourself, right? So you don't have to worry about the vaccines. Then the other question people have come to me is, they'll say, Dr. Riley, what about fertility, right? And it's a problem, I think, because what I've seen on the internet is that some people, they look to see where doctors say things like, well, there's no evidence, right? And they'll try to like lawyerize it in a way where they're trying to twist the words of the person, because in reality, all this kind of stuff is new, right? Nobody knows anything 100%. But so far, we've seen zero in terms of causing problems with fertility. And it should not cause it, because there's really no mechanism. As you go through what I had just said to you before, yeah, that there should be no way that just injecting the mRNA is going to actually cause any problems for fertility, right? Now, the real question is, what about when you get the COVID, right? Because we do know that certain viruses, or really whenever you get sick, they can actually cause problems with fertility. And maybe this is what people are kind of halfway hearing and seeing. And it is a thing that they've recently did a study where they look to see what happens to the production of sperm after people were sick with the COVID. And they see, yes, no, there's actually damage, right? Now, it doesn't seem like it's permanent at all, right? But it is actually a thing that the disease causes you to have problems, much like other viruses. When you get sick, you can imagine this is probably not the time to have a baby, right? So this is actually perhaps not entirely unexpected. But yeah, it's if we're going to have a fear of something, I would say to you, don't have fear of the vaccine, have fear of the disease. And it seems like that, yeah, all the problems come from the disease, not from the vaccine, right? So yeah, so what I would say is that we can get rid of this disease. And it seems that the only way that we're going to be able to get rid of it is to vaccinate, right? And so I need everybody to roll up their sleeve, just like Rosie here, and get their vaccine when their time comes, right? And in the end, really, I think a lot of it just boils down to a simple question: which would you rather get? Because, like I said, it seems inevitable that everyone is going to get the coronavirus. So, what do you want? Do you want to get the vaccine, or do you want to get the disease? Which we've already seen, the disease causes a multitude of bad things. Well, I would say get the vaccine. It seems like it's a no-brainer. So, yeah, when it's your turn, I would say do everything you can to fight against the coronavirus, because the coronavirus has evolved itself to hurt us. And luckily, we've also evolved an ability to fight off viruses, but we have to make use of it, right? So, yeah, I would encourage you to get the vaccine. All right, thank you.